Daily Telegram.
All right, I've been given the go-ahead to let everyone know we are back with the Temple Daily Telegram Sports Podcast. We have reached week 8/week 4 of the high school football season, and it is a pretty significant week ahead of us. Coming at you is Josh Weaver, Daniel Zepeda,
hello,
and Marcus Hood. Fully refreshed from a large Dr. Pepper, I'm assuming.
That's a sweet tea.
Sweet tea, darn.
Yeah,
I missed it.
You go to places like Chick-fil-A, it's all about this.
Go for the sweet tea.
Howdy.
Yes, and there he is.
That's the classic howdy.
Yes.
Since there's no state fair, howdy.
Oh,
Two very quick, maybe 3 quick reasons why this is a pretty good week of high school football action. District 12-6A, Temple and Belton get underway in league play. We have a big game in 9-4A2, Salado against China Spring, and 11-3A1 is still very, very crowded. Yes. So we will get into that and some other things during this awesome edition of the podcast. But first, here is a recap of last week's goings-on. Marcus, over to you.
Well, all right. All right, here's the scores from last week. As we know, the Wildcats suffered their first defeat of the year, losing to Martin 43-25. Belton lost to Midland Lee 26-7. A very tight ball game. Salado edged Waco Connolly 20-15. China Spring put up 58 to Gatesville's 27. Gerald got their first one of the season, beating Robinson 30-27. How about them Cougars?
Yes.
how about them?
There you go. Cameron Yo beat Academy 37-19.
Are you laughing at the Y03?
I am. I was like, what is that? If only people could see behind the scenes.
Yes.
In game I was at last week, McGregor defeated Troy 58-57 in a game that only had 8 points scored in the fourth quarter after it seemed like it was going to be nonstop all night long. Rockdale 55, Caldwell 26, Franklin 52, Rogers 35, Holland 56, Moody 8, Hearn 56 to Bruceville 87. Another tie ball game here. Thorndale 12, Rosebud 7. Iola 49, Bartlett 18. Granger 43, Milano 13. And then we have Buckholz beating the Central, or Syntax Christian Home School, 49-32. Central Texas Christian School defeated Brazos Christian 28-24. And, of course, Lake Belton won again 38-21. Over A&M Consolidated Junior Varsity?
That's correct. Thank you, Marcus, for
you're
reading those.
Good little refresher.
Let's go back and start with that first game, Martin and Temple.
Sure, we can do that. Although that's not going to be first because I want to read what's happening this week.
All right.
As far as our games.
See, Marcus, if you would have come to the production meeting, you would have known the schedule.
Well, also,
but
all I did was ask you to read the last week's scores. I didn't say, like, transition into something else, you know.
That's it. I'm here.
we got an opening for a third seat here on the Sports Podcast.
Wow, I just got fired on the spot. All right, go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry.
And the reason why I want to read off the games that are happening this week is because Belton is at Killeen on Thursday night, opening up district. And I'm going to allow Daniel to kind of, lead us into that game with some information.
You're right. I totally forgot about
Yes.
Thursday night action.
Yeah.
It happens.
But also on Thursday night, we have Lake Belton at San Antonio Central Catholic JV. All right, cool. That's the Thursday night. Friday night in 12-6A, Temple is at Coppers Cove. Harker Heights is at Bryan. And Ellison is playing Shoemaker, Killeen Shoemaker. In 9-4A2, Robinson is at Gatesville. Waco Connolly at Gerald, and the big one in that district, China Spring at Salado. That's one we'll talk about for sure. In 11-3A1, Caldwell is at Academy, Cameron Yo is at Troy, Rockdale is Idle in that district this week. In 13-3A2, Lexington is at Rogers, 12-2A1, Thorndale at Bruceville Eddy, and Moody at Rosebud Lot. And in 13-2A2, Granger is at Iola. Bartlett at Burton was postponed to a later date. Burton is having some COVID issues. And also canceled for this week was Chester at Buckholtz, with Chester having the health concerns. Also, Friday night is Schertz John Paul at CTCS. And Round Rock Concordia at Holy Trinity Catholic. So that's that. And as I mentioned, Belton at Killeen to open up District 12-6A on the road Thursday night, Leo Buckley Stadium. Daniel.
Should be a good one. Yeah, Tigers open up their district slate on Thursday night, and it'll be a good test for the Tigers. Didn't get the win last week, but that wasn't really the top priority for Belton on their 5-hour trip to Midland. I made that drive out there. It's not a whole lot to see. Some nice scenic stuff, but you kind of hit San Angelo, and then you don't hit anything until Midland. So you better be sure to be good on gas.
You just hit dust.
Just a lot of dust, a lot of stuff, a lot of open skies. But but no, I mean to have a long bus ride and then travel to a Grande Communications Stadium there and face a really strong Midland lead team who was undefeated 2-0, now 3-0 on the season. Belton didn't perform poorly. The score, it doesn't look like a close game at 26-7, but you take into some of the accounts, Midland's a good team. They're well coached. They're building a program there. You're playing on the road after a long bus ride. You're playing with the backup quarterback. Belton starting quarterback Ruben Jimenez did not play in that game. Riley Madden got the starting quarterback. So a lot of different pieces to kind of put together there, but consistency continues to be an issue for Belton, but they made a big stride, a big positive leap last week, and that was the big takeaway for Belton head coach Brett Sniffen. He said, they didn't get the win, obviously, but he was extremely proud with how they continued to fight. They held Midland Lee to 26 points, which was about 20 points under their season average through those first two games. They allowed Midland Lee on offense to have about 100 yards less than what they average, so the defense played well at times, still had some issues giving up the big plays, in that they trailed 19-0 at halftime, and then in the third quarter, Belton puts together this long drive ending in a Maurice Reed 1-yard rushing touchdown to pull within 19-7, and at that point, you're kind of thinking, okay, well, if Belton can get a stop, maybe get another score, try to make this a one-score game before the fourth quarter, we might really have something here, but then immediately Midland Lee comes back and goes, I believe, 69 yards in 2 plays with a touchdown. So just kind of, you can see the talent there, you can see the progression, but still the Tigers have some things they need to figure out. But as far as going into district, Coach Sniffen was glad for where the Tigers are. He was glad at the position they're in. So we'll see how it happens. One of the big storylines going into this game is going to be if it's going to be Ruben Jimenez or Riley Madden at quarterback. Coach Sniffen didn't indicate which one they would go for. So, you got Ruben Jimenez, who was the starter all of last year, started the first 2 games of the season for Belton. Didn't have a great season opener, but he really bounced back in that second game, had 315 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, all those 4 touchdowns in the second half to lead that near comeback at Round Rock. And then he also had 139 yards rushing on the ground. So, he looked pretty solid to bounce back. And then Riley Madden, in his first start last week, he goes 12 for 24 for 88 yards. Did throw a pair of interceptions, but again, that was the first time he had ever seen real action there, at least for this season. So, some positives there. And he got better as that game went on. So you gotta like the progression there. For the Kangaroos, it kind of begins and ends on offense with their running back, Kadarius Marshall. He's got 139 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns on the season. A fun fact from last year, he had 139 yards and 2 touchdowns in that single game against Belton. So he really kind of ate the Tigers up last season.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. I don't know where I was going with that, but fun fact.
And fun fact, number 2 from that game last year, the Kangaroos snapped a 5-game losing streak against the Tigers with their victory last year.
Killeen will like to keep that going. Whereas Belton, on the other hand, they've won their last 3 district openers, so that's definitely something they want to keep going as well. So we'll see. Belton with some pretty strong non-district opponents. Killeen was idle last week. They had a non-district game against Waco scheduled, but Waco had some COVID-19 health concerns there, so they had to cancel that one. So, Killeen with 2 games under their belt versus Belton's 3, so you like to think maybe that bodes more in favor for Belton.
Yeah, 3 out of the 8 teams in District 12 6A weren't able to play the full 3-game non-district schedule that everyone had originally mapped out. Shoemaker had a game, I think, week 2. They were supposed to play the team out of Mexico, Nuevo de Leon or whatever it was, and they couldn't get clearance.
With that one.
Yeah, clearance to come in to the country, so they just said, all right, we'll wait till week 3. So Shoemaker played 2 games. Bryan only played 1 game before it had to call off a whole bunch of stuff because it had some COVID issues. And then you mentioned Killeen last week, supposed to play Waco.
Yeah, and let me just add one more thing here for Belton. Really, the key in this one, I think, is going to be if the Tigers can limit the big quarters. In a lot of these games, they've played these teams tight for maybe 2 or 3 quarters, but it's always been 1 quarter in each game that they've really let it slip away. Versus Georgetown in the season opener, they were outscored 22-0 in the 4th quarter in a game that they let slip away at the end there. Next week versus Round Rock, 21-0 in that 1st quarter to get behind early on. And then even last week, Midland Lee only scored the 26 points, but they outscored Belton 16-0 in the 2nd quarter. So Sniffen has talked about it. Some of the defensive players have talked about it. It's a work in progress. They're getting better, but now the games count for real.
Yeah, and as much as, playing consistently through a whole game, as Sniffen was talking about last week, going against Lee, as much as that might help, the win is what's really going to help. That first win is going to, loosen everything up, and we talked a little bit about it before the podcast, first-year coach coming in this year had an especially, uphill climb, with everything being, shut down in March, no spring football, nothing. I mean, he couldn't even see his guys from March, whatever it was, 12th to June 8th, essentially, in person. And there's only so much you can do over Zoom. So there's probably still some learning and feeling out and all that stuff going on over there at Belton. But, I mean, as much as you want to keep getting better, quarter to quarter, picking up that win sooner than later is going to be pretty huge for the Tigers.
You never want to be winless going into district.
Yeah. So, a little bit more on 12-6A coming into the opening week. The teams in the district went 10-10 during non-district action. Shoemaker was 2-0. Bryan won its only game. Temple 2-1. Harker Heights 2-1. Killeen was 1-1. Coppers Cove, Temple's opponent, 1-2, picking up its first victory last week. And then Killeen Ellison was 1-2. So that's kind of where everyone is at going into this opening week. And as far as the Wildcats, they're coming off a loss to Martin, as Marcus read earlier, 43-25, but I don't think they feel distressed at all about it. Stop looking at me, man. I'm just moving a paper around. That's how I'm, keeping my thoughts going. And now you've disrupted it with your eye rolls.
Get some background noise.
I mean, honestly.
I was looking at the papers, not at you.
So when you look back at that Martin game, Temple gave up 21 points via special teams. A bad snap over the punter's head 2 minutes into the game led to a Martin touchdown. The Warriors returned 2 kickoffs for touchdowns. So there's 21 points. They scored another touchdown after Temple's turnover and interception. That was returned to the 1. They scored on the next play. It doesn't mean anything when you say, hey, let's take away those points and see where we're at, but it really is true. I mean, Temple put up a season high 402 yards of offense. They allowed a season low 286, and they still lost by 18. So there's different ways to learn from that game. We obviously, they can say we need to shore up some stuff on special teams, but we played really well, on offense and defense against a really good team. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what how Temple's looking at it going into the game against Copper's Cove.
And what did Stewart say? It's kind of that first quote in your story.
Yeah,
it's just like you look at it and it's just
in the game story he's like I'm looking at it here. It's like what the heck just happened, and his message Saturday, as everyone kind of came together to move on was. We don't need to move on thinking we suck. We don't need to move on thinking we're world beaters because, Temple did beat Longview and Magnolia West, the first 2 weeks of non-district. We just need to move on and learn from our mistakes. So that's kind of where they set the tone.
Kind of stay grounded.
This week, yeah, for sure. And then, when you look at Temple's non-district resume, the teams they played ended up going 6-3 during their non-district run. Longview only lost to Temple. Magnolia West only lost to Temple, and West actually opened up district, I think, last week. But anyway, Longview 2-1, West 2-1, Martin 2-1. So as Belton had a pretty strong non-district
same
run, Temple did as well.
Yeah.
Temple is the reigning co-district champion in 12-6A. The other co-champ, Hewitt Midway, is not in the district anymore. So the Wildcats are starting their defense of that title, which was their first district title, I think, since either 2014 or 2015. So it had been a while. But they're not really worried about that. They're just worried about the Copper's Cove Bulldogs, who are always kind of a tough team to play. They're usually very disciplined on offense. They like to run the ball to set up the pass, but they'll run it in out of different formations, which is a good challenge for any defense. They've been playing a couple quarterbacks, but Shane Ritchie has seen the most action. He's 25 of 44 for 354 yards, 2 TDs, and he's also got 182 yards rushing. Their leading running back is Brandon Ortega. He's had a couple back-to-back 100-yard plus performances, and receiving wise, I don't know if I put him in there or not, but they got a couple guys who have over 100 yards receiving, and one of them is actually Russell Cochran, who is the other quarterback. So some versatility there.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, Temple. Well, I'll get to the versatility in a second, but going into the season, some of the question marks for Temple were at quarterback, were at the offensive line, and were in the secondary among just kind of a relatively young team to begin with as far as varsity experience. Humberto Arizmendi has pretty much answered the question at quarterback. He's completed about 66% of his passes, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The offensive line has progressed week in and week out. Just you look at running back Samari Howard's numbers. He went from about 30 yards rushing in the first game against Longview. He had 111, and then last week 174. So that's obviously
it's a nice little trend
getting better. Yes, and then in the secondary. Keon Williams, Carlton Mack, Otarian Peoples, and Jaden Jackson, the secondary there, all first-time full-time starters this year on varsity, have held their own and been part of a defense that's really not given up a whole lot of points. Yards, yes, about 420 a game, something like that, but points not really. Back-to-back games of only 13 each, and then last week we mentioned most of those points were scored on special teams.
Yeah, so I mean that's really
some of those questions that had Coach Scott Stewart, I wouldn't say worried, but something they needed to sort out over there have pretty much been sorted out and answered going into district. So Yeah, Temple on the road to start out, and then they come back home to host Bryan next week.
Yeah, I feel like if you're Temple right now, after what's happened with your non-district, you got to be feeling pretty confident. I mean, for sure. I mean,
yeah,
like you just mentioned.
Yeah, and then I did mention the versatility, and where I wanted to say that was at wide receiver. That was the other kind of question mark too. Was they knew they had AJ McDuffie and Luke Allen on the outside. It was going to be who was kind of going to line up in the slot, and they usually run two guys out there. One of them was Tredarius Taylor, who's played pretty well. He's also been on kickoff return, and then the other one was Michael Harrison Pilot, who was the other guy in the running for starting quarterback as a sophomore. He's had a great start at wide receiver, leads the team in receptions, and then the last 2 weeks he caught his first touchdown pass, and then last week against Martin threw a touchdown pass in the waning moments of that game. So
that guy's just way too athletic.
Oh yeah, I mean he's gonna be on the field constantly, and the same goes for Samari Howard, the running back. Last week he threw a 2-point pass to actually the kicker, Aaron Wagaman. He's lined up in the Wildcat a few times, and that just opens everything up for Temple's offense, which I think still really hasn't found its top gear yet. I mean, we're going to still wait for that, and they've had some pretty good performances so far. So a lot to look forward to for the Temple Wildcats and their fans as we go on. That's right. And Marcus has something to look forward to this Friday. He gets to go watch Salado play China Spring in 9-4A2, two front runners in that district after the first couple weeks of action.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, probably including the three of us, probably think this is the game that determines the district champion.
Yeah, especially after Salado beat Connolly last week.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And we knew that one was going to be pretty tough, and it was a tight ball game. And of course, I think that win kind of boosts a little bit of Salado's confidence, no matter how close it was. But yeah, you're looking at a 6-0 China Spring team against a 6-1 Salado team, and kind of different styles. I mean, we know Salado with Reed Vincent, Noah Mesher, they're just going to run the ball at you. China Spring, more balanced attack a little bit. But if Salado can do what they do well and keep the ball moving on offense, eat up the clock, and use that misdirection, wing tee, slot tee, whichever one you want to run offense.
It's the slot tee.
Okay, slot tee. Yeah, it is.
They just run a lot. That's all I know.
They run. Yeah, and they do it well. And then they'll throw in that one or two pass when you're not expecting it.
Last week, I don't even know if there was one, right?
Or maybe one for one, but
okay.
I don't think it was complete.
Yeah, and
still one attempted pass all game.
And this China Spring Salado matchup, though, I mean, China Spring scoring 50 points a game and allowing less than 20, I believe. Salado's scoring 40 points a game and allowing. I forget what I calculated earlier from my preview cap, but it's definitely also under 20. And they've only given up, 15 last week, but only 7 in each of the last 2 games. So, I mean, it might even be less than that. But they've really been stingy on defense the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, it definitely should be a game to watch. I mean, it's the one bad thing about the whole COVID thing and the limited capacity is when you have these big games, you're at less than half capacity, so you don't get that big game atmosphere all the time. But the crowd's definitely, as many fans can show up, they're all going to be there. They're all going to be loud, I'm sure, at this one all night long.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that Salado or China Spring need a few extra thousand fans to let them know that this is a huge one. I mean, it's motivation. It's big regardless. I mean, they can be playing in a vacant lot, and it's going to be huge just based on what's at stake for this one.
Yeah, I think the main key for Salado is they're going to probably have to score first, and then just kind of, I think I think it's one of those games where, a lot of teams like to defer. I think if Salado wins the coin flip, they might actually accept the
Yeah.
Talk
kind
tonight,
of
guys.
no, just kind of like take the ball and then try to eat up 10 minutes off the clock
Right.
to open up the ball game, and then
It is one of those, and you get the lead because you can eat up the clock, and then maybe go for that last possession of the first half as well, and then maybe go in with a 1-score lead, hopefully a 2-score lead, even if you are kicking off second half.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
one of those. I mean, obviously I'm not in Coach Harris' mind. I don't know what he's going to do come game time, but in games like this, you often see that kind of thing opposite of what you might normally do type of deal.
Yeah.
So,
The other point in that district, when you read off the scores, and Gerald beating Robinson, Gerald's first win of the season put them smack dab in the middle of the playoff race.
right, yeah. if they can
in that
tonight,
district.
Or if they can be Conley, I mean,
Friday night, yeah.
it doesn't necessarily secure a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Just like
it does a lot.
Well, I mean, they don't necessarily have to be Connolly. Gatesville can also get back into the mix with a win over Robinson.
Right.
I think it's possible that the fourth place team in that district only needs 2 victories, right?
yeah, basically, 2 victories could get you in.
Yeah.
You definitely want to have 3.
Yeah.
2 would get you in. Even a 1 in a
Right.
a tiebreaker scenario would get you in, but you don't want that to happen. But
Yeah.
it is kind of neat the way it's set up this week, where the 2-0 teams are facing off, the 1-1 teams are facing off, and the 0-2 teams
Yeah.
are facing off. So you'll at least get a little separation and know where everybody's at.
Yep.
Have a better idea. I usually go and look at these things to see if the winner of the Salado China Spring game does secure a playoff spot. I'm sure there's a scenario which it's probably possible, and but this has been one of those seasons where
I know.
so much is happening. I haven't really looked at that stuff yet.
Yeah.
You really just can't look too far ahead, because you have
Right.
no idea what's
Yeah.
going to happen week to week.
I mean, the
Secure
winner.
a playoff spot, then end the season because of COVID. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the winner is going to be 3-0 with 3 games
Right.
left to play. So,
It'd be difficult not to, but
yeah.
you could still have a big, massive 6-way tie.
Right. Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. This would be the year
That
for
would
it.
be same thing.
Anything can happen.
Yeah, and that's the case down in 11-3A1. If we can look down in that district now. Academy just overall has at 5-2. That's the best record in that district overall. And right now they're sitting second to last in district at 1-2. I mean, that's how tough it's going to be for teams to make it out of that district. There's Academy, just using them as an example, could have a 6-4 record or something like that and miss out
Yeah.
of the playoffs. Somebody can have that type of
Yeah.
record and miss out.
I mean, it's
of the
very
playoffs.
possible you're going to have a team that's above 500 and be sitting at home once the playoffs come.
Yeah, because right now, Yo bounced back from its loss to Rockdale by beating Academy to move to 2-1 in district. Rockdale's 2-1 in district, and McGregor bounced back from its last-second loss to Academy by edging Troy to go to 2-1. So now it's Yo, Rockdale, McGregor at 2-1, Troy 1-1, Lorena 1-1, Academy 1-2, and Caldwell 0-2.
That's a big game for Troy, just based on the standings.
Oh, yeah, Friday night. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yo playing Troy and Caldwell at Academy. That's a must-win for Academy.
Right.
And McGregor at Lorena. I don't even know who Academy would want in that one. I guess, nobody.
Is neither an option?
Yeah. it's
Because Academy lost to Lorena in the district opener, and so it's
you
just
can't really think about that. You
Yeah.
just think about winning
just
your
one.
game,
Yeah,
first of all.
exactly.
In this district, I mean, these teams, the thing about it is, it's not just so much balance in this district, it's just because everybody knows what everybody else brings, it becomes kind of like what McGregor did last week. It becomes kind of more of a chess match. Let's get in your heads. McGregor, would it look like it might become a shootout pretty early on? McGregor's coaching staff said, you know what? It doesn't matter if Troy starts to drive at the 50 or the 20 if they're going to score. It doesn't matter if they score 50 yards out or 80 yards out. So let's go for the onside kick every time. And, that's what tilted it for them. And every time they scored a touchdown, they started going for 2. Even though their kicker had made both their attempts early on, clearly, without any issues.
Yeah.
So it's like, we just got to do something different.
Right.
It's that thing, do what teams are not thinking you're going to do. Play mind games with your opponent, and you might see that all across this district just to get an edge up on anybody.
Yeah, and they won despite giving up almost 400 yards rushing to one person.
Yeah, that was one thing. We had talked about this, but I compared my notes with 3 other people who were keeping stats, and all 3 of us had different final game numbers for Zach Herbacek, which in the end I think I had him at 391 yards, which is a ridiculous amount. The guy from McGregor I think had him at 395 yards, and then Troy had him at 380 something on their stats, which is
not bad.
It's going to become official, but yeah, it was because at the end of that game, I mean, everything's moving so fast, it's hard to kind of keep track. And then the officiating crew on a couple of times just had weird spots, so we didn't always write down the exact yardage to where it was. It kind of messed us up a little bit too, but that's neither here nor there. It was a great game regardless of that. It was just
when you had so many yards just for that entire game, I mean, all the scoring and everything else that goes into it, it's real hard to get down to the nitty gritty.
Like Josh said, McGregor gives up almost 400 yards to one player, and they still win the game by a point.
Yeah, that reminds me of the first Belton game I covered. It was actually at Copper's Cove in 2015, and Belton rushed for more than 600 yards and lost. Copper's Cove still found a way to win after even giving up 600 yards rushing. Yeah, it was pretty incredible. So, I don't know what this district is going to leave us with after this week, and I don't know what's going to happen 3 weeks from now on that last Friday of the season. It's going to be pretty interesting to follow, as it has been all season.
Yeah. If anybody out there could predict the final order of finish this district, even now, 3 games into it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a challenge for you.
For sure.
Tweet us. Let us know what you think it's going to be.
There you go.
If you get it right, we'll give you a shout out in our end of the year podcast. Maybe we won't.
I mean, you think we're actually going to remember that?
Probably not.
We'll try.
I don't know.
Yeah. Tweet us.
We'll like it, and then it'll be like in our stored likes or something. We can go back and look.
At least let us know you're listening.
Or not.
Maybe we don't want to know if you're listening.
Speaking of Twitter, I did see a tweet from a Rogers coach, I believe, who said the Eagles he thinks is one of the best 2-5 teams in Texas, which is probably true. They've played a really tough schedule, and they sit at 2-5 overall and 1-2 in district, which is 5th.
Yeah.
So, and they got Lexington this week. And a victory would be huge over Lexington, and that's one of those teams we mentioned it last week. You're never really sure how that team's going to show up.
Yeah.
But Rogers, now's the time to make the move, and it's going to have to start with Lexington for sure to get into that top 4.
Yeah. The nice thing about it is, I mean, they do have a win over Clifton, which right now is ahead of them in the standings.
Yeah.
So they would have that head-to-head tiebreaker if it comes down to that. But you've got to get there first and beat Lexington. You definitely want to do that.
Because you don't want to obviously look past Florence and Riesel.
Right.
Those are the 2 teams that Rogers plays next after Lexington. But on paper, historically speaking, those are games that Rogers should win. And that's why this makes this Lexington game all the more important.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to go into those games against the district bottom runners with pressure to actually have to win.
Yeah, and needing other things to happen too.
Yeah. So you definitely want to take care of business this week and then kind of secure your own destiny along the way.
12-2A1, Holland idle this week, but it's looks like the Hornets are on their way to the playoffs again. Obviously, like we said a bunch of times already, we're not, still some things to go, but
kind of got back on track last week, and Moody is
handling Moody pretty good.
Yeah, that Moody Rosebud Lock game. I mean, right now that's kind of a battle for teams that you kind of want to win that one just to keep any small playoff hope alive right now.
Yeah, exactly, and Thorndale beating Rosebud Lot 12-7. That's really close.
Yeah.
I don't know if Thorndale's offense just is. It seems like it's been having trouble scoring points lately. But gotta hand it to Rosebud Lot for keeping that one close against a team that predicted to make the playoffs. Yeah. And then that's a rivalry game, Rosebud Lot and Moody. So never know there.
Yeah.
13-2A2. That's obviously, we talked about it. It's had some COVID issues with Burton's schedule getting all rearranged, things like that. Granger leading the way there at 3-0. And has second place Iola this week, so that'll be a good one.
Right. And Granger, fortunately, they're one of the only teams in that district whose schedule is not affected because of all the COVID stuff. I mean, all these other teams are going to end up playing like some Wednesday night football, some Monday night football, and a Saturday afternoon game. Just because it's kind of, we tweeted it out. So, again, if you follow us on Twitter, the schedule update's there. So.
Yeah. Let's see. Buckholz, we mentioned, is not going to be playing this week. Central Texas Christian, 2-1. Back into district play this week after a non-district game last week. And just real quick, Ryan Turley, the running back for the Lions, 57 carries, 611 yards, and 10 touchdowns rushing. So off to a great start there. 3 games in. I didn't look up TAP's playoff qualification things. I'm pretty sure CTCS is kind of in no matter what, possibly. Just because of the divisions and all that stuff. I don't want to, obviously assume that, but
it is kind of weird. They have like what they call wild card teams.
Yeah. Anyway, but regardless, the Lions, looking to get on track in district. They lost their opener a couple weeks ago to Shiner St. Paul.
Perennial power. So
yes. Yeah.
It's a tough test.
But CTCS is actually ranked in its division, I believe, in TAPS. So look out for Turley. Pretty good running back. Holy Trinity Catholic had a weird thing happen to them last week. What it looked like the referees didn't show up or something.
Right.
The officials.
And Austin Veritas, or I don't know how you pronounce that.
Veritas, yeah.
And for what was supposed to be a district game, of course, it is one of those where Veritas and one other team are kind of in a separate division as Holy Trinity anyway. So they go down there, and apparently, I don't know what exactly happened, but there's no refs. So there's basically 2 guys that were just kind of wearing, looked like T-shirts and coaching shorts that were doing all the officiating. So they played the game, but it doesn't count. And I don't even remember.
What a weird situation.
Yeah, it was but I guess, if you're going to go all the way down there and the refs don't show up, you're already there.
Yeah, you might as well play.
Yeah, do something. Even if you just scrimmage, I think that's probably what they decided. We could have this all wrong.
We're either going to play or we're going to go to the Domain or Top Golf or something. And they decided to play.
Right. I'll probably
good for them.
Top Golf.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know. There's other places in Austin to go to as well.
True. Those are just the first 2 that popped in my head.
Yeah, we got a couple video clips, and that's what it looked like. So we're not exactly sure. We did text James Shelton just to find out, and he said, the game doesn't count. So.
Well, that's a bummer.
Yep.
Back on track this week.
But on we go. And on we go to the grand finale of this podcast, I believe, which is Daniel reading names and numbers.
There we go. Okay.
Come on, man, do it.
Let's go. All right.
Come on, man.
Your area rushing leaders coming into after last week. Zach Robachik from Troy. He has.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I just mentioned him once or twice. This guy's got 1,753 yards on the season, 30 touchdowns. As I'm looking through the area leaders, I don't see anyone with more than 15, and the 15 also stands out. So that's
a lot too.
That is just pretty phenomenal, honestly. Coming in next is Noah Mesher from Salado with 1,069 yards, 14 touchdowns. Derek Warren from Jarrell is next with 10 touchdowns, 1,025 yards on the season. Cameron Valdez out of Rockdale, 906 yards with 15 touchdowns. Reed Vincent, also from Salado, 746 yards, 5 touchdowns. Christian Riley, I believe he had a big week last week from Rogers, 658 yards, 5 touchdowns. Jason DeLong from Gatesville with, 608 yards rushing on the season with 4 touchdowns. And then to wrap it up, the quarterback from Moody, Ryder Hohertz, 547 yards rushing on the season, also with 4 touchdowns.
And then just real quick from Buckholz, I think we just finally got a full season stat list from Coach over there. Yeah, Nathaniel Plumley, 12 touchdowns, which is what, 5th in the area, at least as far as our stats go. So that's not bad.
Not a bad year. Not
and
at
that
all.
Derek Warren, he seems like the heart and soul of that Jarrell offense.
Yeah, he consistently is putting up those numbers.
He's been awesome all year he's kind of kept that offense going and got them in a position to make the playoffs.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right, moving on to the top passers in the area. Kobe Mitchell from Rockdale. He's got 1,112 yards passing on the season with 12 touchdowns. Zane Zeinert from Cameron Yo, 1,082 yards, 13 touchdowns. Jerry Cephas from Academy, 982 yards, 9 touchdowns. Zach Hapley from Buckholz, another Buckholz shout-out, 882 yards, 9 touchdowns. Connor Cruz from Lake Belton, 801 yards passing, 13 touchdowns. He's been able to do it through the air and on the ground this season for the Broncos. Luke Mullins out of Gatesville, 789 yards passing, 9 touchdowns. And then Thomas Rhodes, another dual threat guy from Granger. He has got 761 yards passing and 10 touchdowns, on the season. So a lot of good passers in the area. Moving on now to your top receivers. We'll start with reception leaders on the season. Keyshawn Raven from Rockdale has 35 catches. Jalen McWilliams from Academy with 31. Levi LaFavors from Bruceville Eddy with 30. Darion Franklin from Academy with 27. Anthony Dansby, the big tight end from Rockdale, he's got 25 catches. Carson Bresendine from Gatesville with 24. Zachorian Spikes from Cameron Yo with 24. Jaden Simmons from Academy with 24. Johnny Ryder from Granger with 24, and then Jaden Fletcher out of Moody with 21 catches. And then those top receivers, moving on to yards receiving on the season. Jalen McWilliams from Academy, 490 yards, 8 touchdowns. Zachorian Spikes out of Cameron Yo, 481 yards, 7 touchdowns. Keyshawn Raven from Rockdale, 465 yards, 8 touchdowns. Anthony Dansby from Rockdale, 454 yards, 4 touchdowns. Jaden Simmons out of Academy, 389 yards, 3 touchdowns. Darion Franklin, also from Academy, 380 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then we'll wrap up with Jordan Landrum out of Rosebud Lot. He has 20 catches for 378 yards and 4 touchdowns on the season.
How is that 11-3-A-1 going to pick superlatives this year too and vote on?
There's a lot of guys,
man.
A lot of good numbers.
And those are just the teams that we keep stats for.
And then on the other side of the ball, you got just as good of defensive standouts. Guys like Jalen McWilliams who can score pick sixes anytime.
You saw McGregor's offense and what it can do last week. That district is some incredible skill players.
We know about Zach, and it was his pass from McGregor. They were kind of impressing just because they were racking up the numbers there too.
Yep.
We got to start keeping track of how many times we just roll our eyes every time we just mention 11-3-A-1 because it's just there's just a lot to think about.
It's entertaining. It's something to look forward to and to just kind of marvel at, I guess, just the scenarios and the possibilities. So,
and if you're a coach in that district, you definitely have some gray hairs right now.
Yes.
If you even have hair at this point.
Well, that's true. Yeah. A few of them are lucky to keep those last pieces in.
See, now you're just...
Oh, man. No coaches from there are going to want to talk to us anymore after that.
Sure they will.
The coaches there, they love us.
They're great.
I think.
Maybe.
Take us home, Josh.
Oh, no, you guys have your own cars, right? No,
I'm taking an Uber.
That's
okay. Yeah,
true. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute my mic now.
All right, come back next week. Enjoy your games.